Hello fellow cyborgs, today I would like to talk with you about 3 books that deal with colorism and or passing. So for those of you who don't know, the term of colorism refers to the idea of prejudice or discrimination within the Black community of people who are darker skinned Black people. It's the idea that you want to be as light as possible, even going as far as bleaching creams, and related to colorism is the idea of passing. If you're light skinned enough, even though you're a person of color, you can pass for white. I recently read 3 books that deal with these themes, and I wanted to briefly review them here as a collection. But before we get on to the books that I read, I wanted to direct you to Ash from Bookish Realm. She recently did a video about colorism, understanding colorism, and even a little bit into texturism, which has to do with the texture of hair. I will have her video linked down below. I did get some of these recommendations from Ash, so I highly recommend that you check out that video and her channel. The first book I'm going to talk about is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is highly talked about on BookTube right now, and perhaps it's partly because of the very colorful cover. This is the story of twin sisters. Their paths diverge once they leave this small town that they grew up in. And in this town, the lightness of your skin, this is a community of color, really matters. Eventually, one of the sisters comes back to their town with a very dark child with her, and we learn that the other sister is passing for white. This book follows not only the sisters' journeys to where they ended up at the beginning of the novel, but also how their decisions and how their divergent journeys resonate through their children as well. The characterization in The Vanishing Half is vibrant. I understood and was able to empathize with all of the characters very easily. There's also representation of a trans man in here, which, as far as I can tell, not being part of that community, is respectful and fair. That was probably the biggest surprise and my favorite part of the novel, to be perfectly honest. It was really interesting to see Stella, the sister who's passing, deal with how she's going to talk with her daughter or not talk with her daughter about race in America. How she's going to handle racial slurs around her daughter, who, unbeknownst to her, is Black. I also really enjoyed the side character of Early. He was a really charming and complex character. Overall, I enjoyed this quite a bit and would be interested in reading more by Bennett, but I didn't absolutely love it, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook, which I did like, but I wonder how my experience would have been if I had read it instead. The other audiobook and a modern classic I want to talk about is Passing by Nella Larson. Similar to The Vanishing Half, but predating it, this is the story of 2 friends who are light-colored Black women. One of whom has married a man who's darker than her and very much lives within the Black community, and another who has married a very vocally racist white man and is passing for white. Their surprising reconnection brings up ideas that one of our characters hasn't considered before. The idea of what passing really means and is it worth it. I listened to the audiobook of this, which I did quite enjoy. There was a lot about passing that reminded me of The Awakening by Kate Chopin, simply because it is a relatively short novel, it is a relatively simple novel, but it's just deceptively simple. I think I would like to reread Passing physically rather than through an audiobook, to read it more slowly and really digest and analyze what's going on. I especially enjoyed the scenes where characters are existing passing for white with white people not knowing, the tension that is there, especially when race and racist comments come up, and also the idea of not wanting to have any more children for the fear of one of your future children being born dark and therefore not being able to pass for white and exposing your secret. This was the book of the 3 that I enjoyed the most, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 star rating, and I will want to reread it in the future for sure. And finally, we have The Wedding by Dorothy West. The back blurb of this makes it sound like this deals with the wedding of Shelby, who is a very light-skinned Black woman living in a Black bourgeoisie community in the 1950s. She's going to marry a white jazz musician and the complications that have to do with this wedding. However, what this book is actually about is Shelby's family history and the colorism throughout the years. So I don't think you should go into this book thinking that it's simply about a wedding in the 1950s and the ramifications of a very light-skinned Black woman marrying a white man of a different class than her family. It's more about her family and how she came to be and how the family is coping with the colorism that still exists within their family household today. Specifically, Shelby's great-grandmother is white. She and her family owned a plantation pre-Civil War, but it was taken away from them and they fell to destitution afterwards. Graham, the great-grandmother, her daughter had to marry a Black man because she was getting old and they were poor and he was her only option. And ever since then, Graham has been trying to slowly whiten the line. And with Shelby's impending marriage to a white man, Graham is hopeful that her line will finally be white again. Add to that the complication that Shelby's older sister married a man darker than her and her child is darker and Graham won't even touch the child. It's definitely an interesting family situation. But everything that the family is coping with doesn't solely boil down to colorism. There are other flaws within these characters as well that they're having to work through. So I think I might have enjoyed this more had I known this was going to be a intergenerational family drama rather than just a discussion of colorism and classism within one family in the 1950s. The writing was beautiful though, so I think I will be keeping this on my shelves and rereading it sometime in the future. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. So those were the 3 books I recently read that dealt with colorism. Please let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of these or if you have any other recommendations. Thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely.